A despised farm boy stumbled into a rebellion commanded by a necromancer with a rare legacy profession. In the heat of the moment, he unexpectedly hijacked the necromancer's powers, unlocking a secondary profession and gaining the ability to cultivate the undead. From then on, he began his ascent from rock bottom to the absolute peak of existence. In Fenghuan City, the class awakening ceremony was about to commence. A young man hopped off a carriage and thanked Uncle Zhang before watching him drive away. He mused that the atmosphere was exactly what one expects from the annual awakening test, as the venue was incredibly lively. Inside the barrier, humans faced their profession awakening test once they reached adulthood. These professions varied immensely, with rarity tiers spanning from N-rank, SR-rank, SSR-rank, all the way up to UR-rank. The rarer the class, the stronger the combat power. A golden rule of any leveling manhwa, and anyone who unlocked a high-tier class secured a direct ticket to a prestigious academy. Surrounding him, hopeful youths attending their awakening were fervently praying to legacy class holders for blessings, desperate for a superior result. One guy nearby pleaded for the Grandmaster Berserker to bless him with an S-rank class during this examination. Another urged the queue to move faster as his turn approached, while someone else sincerely beseeched the great heavenly maiden, an idol she had worshipped since childhood, to grant her the power to become a noble legacy class holder. A bystander scoffed, remarking that they were daydreaming in broad daylight. Overhearing the chatter piqued the carriage boy's curiosity, so he asked a nearby teen what the fuss was about. The teen explained there were rumors that a new legacy class holder was destined to emerge during this year's test, and with 4 vacant legacy slots remaining, everyone was naturally praying with maximum intensity. The boy mused that this unusual eagerness to level up this year meant business would be booming for him. Suddenly, a signal blared, and an announcer declared that the test had officially begun. Results were broadcasted sequentially. Lin awakening in rank class at level 10 with 13 mana points. Shaw and N rank class at level 8 with 8 mana points. And Gus landing a dismal F rank class, level 34 with 55 mana points, a stat line that secured his admission. A bystander remarked with envy that he actually possessed 55 mana points, wishing he commanded that much power. The young man from the carriage then retrieved an item and casually asked if the envious guy wanted a tomato capable of boosting his mana. The mention of a tomato that could instantly restore mana caught everyone's attention immediately. He explained that he was a spirit plant doctor, and that this was a superior variety he had meticulously cultivated. He claimed each tomato could increase a person's mana by 5% for 5 minutes. These tomatoes were priced at merely 5 gold coins each. The boy added that he also carried hunger sweet potatoes capable of keeping a person full for an entire day, slimming cucumbers that burned fat, and power potatoes known to increase attack power by 10%. The crowd looked skeptical, hoping this was not some sort of scam, but he reiterated that his produce could genuinely boost mana and even aid in weight loss. Since they were all sick of consuming tasteless energy bars every single day, they eventually decided that trying something fresh would not hurt. He announced that sales were on a first-come, first-served basis with limited stock, and once sold out, that was it. The first customer would even receive a free sample. The guy who stepped up first was only half convinced, examining the tomato closely. However, after taking a bite, he felt an instant surge of energy. He exclaimed that his mana had truly increased, and that his body suddenly felt significantly lighter. Another person rushed over, wondering if his eyes deceived him. It felt like a scene from an awakening manhwa, as he recognized the spirit crops from the Extraordinary Academy's Agri-Institute items, supposedly supplied only to S-rank students. The boy explained that this was a special promotion for the testing assembly, noting that everyone here had the potential to become students of the academy in the future. The man immediately requested to have the entire stock wrapped up for himself. The others were displeased and argued that they had arrived first. Now that they had witnessed the miraculous effects firsthand, they also clamored to try them. The boy mused that, although he possessed only a farmer-type class ever since reaching max level, the vegetables and fruits he cultivated somehow gained beneficial buffs. He admitted inwardly that he had consumed a few marketing gimmicks, yet the potency of his produce was the real deal. Sometime later, outside a specific shop, another man approached while the lad was packing his gear. The man tallied the items, brought chestnuts and pumpkin seeds, for 5 gold flour and rhinoceros dung for 7 gold brewing sugar, for 10 gold plus mana and energy. Potions totaling 257 gold coins. The young man tipped him 10 gold coins for the trouble. He then noted that he still lacked the funds to purchase high-grade fertilizer for the fields. The man thanked Brother Lin Feng and asked why he did not simply cultivate more spirit plants if they were so beneficial. Lin Feng replied that it was not as simple as it seemed. The man remarked, it was a pity that someone as talented as Lin Feng since childhood had ended up in this situation. Lin Feng urged the man to hurry home, as Auntie Xiao was waiting. After seeing him off, he could not help but reflect that, despite being hailed as a genius, he had only awakened an N-rank farmer class. He joked inwardly that if he burned joss paper for his archdruid father, the old man might burst out of his coffin in a rage. Perhaps it really was a case of opposites, canceling out. A herbalist mother and an archdruid father somehow produced a farmer. Still thinking it over carefully, he felt quite satisfied with his peaceful life. He was spared from dying on the battlefield like his father, and he would not cause his mother any worry. Even if only for her sake, he had to manage the family farm properly. As he continued walking, he suddenly wondered why it felt like rain on a clear day. Before he could react, someone crashed down right in front of him. Lin Feng froze, wondering if the city wall had collapsed or if the demon clan had breached the perimeter. A moment later, the fallen man shakily rose and announced that the legacy class holder Necromancer HIJACKS had defected and intended to surrender his class legacy to the demon clan. A bystander shouted that they needed to report this immediately. But before anything else could happen, a massive clock materialized behind the man. Lin Feng stared in total shock, wondering what on earth was happening with this class legacy being handed to the demon clan was even conceivable. A sudden wave of energy swept across the entire zone. A voice barked at him, calling him a moron for not fleeing and asking if he was eager to meet his end. The speaker claimed that if he hadn't been wounded by forbidden arts, he would have evacuated the city ages ago, and that once he surrendered his class legacy to the demon clan, he would acquire an undying physique. He noted that since he had delayed for this long, the academy had likely already caught on. Lin Feng attempted to slip away quietly, realizing he had clearly stumbled into a grisly homicide scene, ought to vanish before the perpetrator noticed his presence. But he was too sluggish. The man locked eyes on him and demanded to know who authorized him to depart. He mentioned that the earlier victim was Dean Yu of the Extraordinary Academy and lamented it as a pathetic death, suggesting he use Lin Feng's flesh and blood as a sacrificial tribute in his honor. Lin Feng realized he was completely immobilized. The terrifying figure had him thoroughly cornered. He tried to compose himself and deliberate, frantically searching for any means to repel this guy. Lin Feng suddenly spotted a derived skill beneath his maxed out farm tool mastery, typical of a system Manhwa known as farm tool summoning. As he drew his tool, he cautioned that sacrifices were a task one should handle personally, lest they end up in the 18th level of hell. The man was flabbergasted, unable to fathom that a mere farmer class had managed to harm him. Lin Feng muttered that this was the moment. And in the next instant, a potent eruption of power burst from his body, blasting the enemy backward. Yet, the surrounding energy refused to subside. It continued to surge higher and higher. The enemy cursed, identifying it as the signature formation of a demon array dancer. Since matters had reached this point, he resolved to commandeer Lin Feng's body and flee. His entire soul abruptly dove straight into Lin Feng. Internally, the voice remarked that while the farmer class was the bottom tier, Lin Feng's innate talent wasn't poor, and he should consider himself fortunate to serve as its vessel. Lin Feng retorted that he had cultivated assiduously every single day since childhood, and if the demon intended to seize his body, he would have to earn it. The demon scoffed, stating that the discrepancy in rank was massive, representing a power level Lin Feng could seemingly never attain. He felt that luck, clearly, had abandoned him this time, so he decided they might as well die together. He raised his farm tool, prepared to strike himself. The voice screamed, demanding to know his intentions, but Lin Feng insisted that he would rather perish than surrender his physical vessel. His only hope was that in death, he wouldn't have to endure his father's nagging in the afterlife. Before he could deliver the blow, a torrent of energy burst from his heart. The demon was startled by the blinding radiance, questioning if the boy's mana core was detonating. As the power escalated, the entity panicked, screaming that this phenomenon was impossible. The intruder was suddenly shackled by countless restraints before the consciousness was engulfed in a gargantuan explosion. A system prompt appeared, announcing that Lin Feng had acquired a new talent, the Legacy class, Necromancer. Lin Feng jolted awake in shock. He realized he was still breathing and retained full control over his own body. The demon's possession had failed. He then discovered he could manipulate the same dark aura the entity had utilized. Checking the interface typical of a system Manhwa, he saw his class mutated to Spirit Farmstead Master, unique level 1, with stats listed as Strength 300, Constitution 300, Agility 100, Mana 10, Spirit 100, and Luck 300. His skills now included Appraisal, Reclamation, Passive, Undead Affinity, Efficient Planting, Beginner Overgrowth, Rapid Harvest, Beginner Undead, Summoning Increased Yield, Passive Soul Siphon, and Farm Tool Mastery at max level. Lin Feng observed that while his level had reset to 1, he retained all the attributes from his max level farmer class. He realized that his mana pool had grown due to absorbing that wretch's soul power, meaning that when he leveled up again, his stats could shatter the limits of a standard farmer. Intrigued by the new undead summoning skill, he questioned whether he could truly raise the dead, praying he wouldn't accidentally summon that demonic intruder. He began to experiment channeling magic through both palms to test various combinations. The agrarian mana and the necrotic energy started to coalesce into a single force. Shutting his eyes, he contemplated the implications. His class tree remained stable, and he hadn't lost the agricultural profession. Instead, he had acquired a second class, the Necromancer. The entity that invaded his body was truly a legendary legacy holder, which made him question if that man was actually deceased. Lin Feng could sense that this dark power was not fully his just yet. If he failed to tame and assimilate it completely, not only would his farmer class collapse and vanish, but his consciousness would eventually be devoured once again. He muttered that the repulsive yellow aura certainly looked the part. He attempted a summoning ritual. A magic circle materialized, and from within emerged an undead sage at level 1, and the undead wild hunt, also at level 1. Lin Feng realized it was truly them. Although their levels had been reset, they retained their combat instincts and could rise in rank again. Suddenly, he sensed the enforcement squad approaching and knew he had to flee immediately. No one would believe that a simple farmer had eliminated 2 extraordinary figures, and if his current situation was exposed, it could lead to absolutely fatal consequences. His top priority was finding a location with shelter resources and secluded land where he could experiment with this dangerous new power and bring his father's theories to life. One day later, back at Lin Feng's farm, he noted that a full day had passed, yet the necromancer's corrupting influence on his class still had not faded. A television broadcast played in the background, announcing the birthday of the old agronomy professor. While using magic on the crops, Lin Feng observed that everything catalyzed by his new power had started turning bizarre, and the more they grew, the stranger and more terrifying they became. The plants had mutated so much that they were even snatching birds right out of the sky. Lin Feng could hardly believe his eyes. If anyone else witnessed this, they would likely assume a demon clan invasion was underway. He decided he needed to destroy it immediately. He later realized that the new mana had caused a common crop to undergo a terrifying mutation. If he could just control this power and guide it properly, he might be able to cultivate the unique varieties his father had always envisioned, but never succeeded in creating the kind of high-value crops that could strengthen a person's class in a leveling Manhwa. On the television screen, the familiar news anchor abruptly cut into the broadcast to display an urgent wanted poster. The subject was HIJACKS, the legacy class necromancer, who had launched a rebellion the previous day and assassinated Dean Yui. His crimes were deemed heinous. Anyone providing leads would be rewarded, while those sheltering him would be charged as accomplices. Lin Feng realized he had to be extremely careful. The undead power of a necromancer absolutely could not be exposed. He needed to brainstorm a cover name for his undead followers to deflect suspicion, and suddenly an idea struck him. He would call them farm hands, as his interface, typical of a system Manhwa, listed him as a spirit farmstead master. Having helpers was normal. The news continued, stating that the Extraordinary Academy was expanding enrollment to deal with the increasing pressure from the Demon Clan. All candidates who passed the examination would gain preferential access to Academy resources. They would also be granted a private manor for cultivating high-tier crops, along with special financial subsidies. Once enrolled, students were even permitted to hire farmers to grow high-recovery crops for them. Lin Feng pondered the offer. The academy's land was safe, fertile, and rich in resources. It was exactly what he needed right now. He had to get in. The necromancer identity was a ticking time bomb, but a spirit farmstead master was just a farmer in everyone else's eyes. At the extraordinary academy registration plaza, Lin Feng waited in line with the others. Soon, they asked for his details. He had to provide his name, age, awakened, class, and level. He introduced himself as Lin Feng, 18 years old, a level 1 spirit farmstead master. The examiner checked Lin Feng's information on the paper and muttered that he had never heard of a spirit farmstead master before. He assumed it was just another non-combat class trying to sneak through and told Lin Feng to release his class aura. Lin Feng did as instructed, but after sensing the energy, the examiner clicked his tongue in obvious dismissal. He scoffed that it was merely the useless aura of a farmer class. Calling for the next person, he snapped at Lin Feng not to waste his time. The people waiting nearby burst into laughter. Someone mocked him for making up such a ridiculous class name, sneering that a piece of level 1 farmer trash actually dared to register, urging him to scurry back to his crops. The student ahead even buttered up the examiner, claiming he would never hire a peasant like Lin Feng to till his soil, adding that he shouldn't drag down the academy's ranking. Lin Feng argued that his profession was a rare variant and implored the proctor for a shot, asserting his foundational skills were rock solid. The instructor sneered, asking what sort of basics a level 1 piece of trash could possibly possess. He signaled security to eject him. Before they could land a hand, Lin Feng swiftly displayed the admission pamphlet, noting it explicitly permitted all awakened classes to take the exam, and warned that he would file a formal complaint. He boldly threatened to contact the Supervision Bureau regarding a teacher who was obstructing a student from the entrance test. The examiner paused instantly, bellowing at the boy for the audacity to issue such ultimatums, vowing he would ensure Lin Feng regretted this insolence. He proclaimed there was zero chance a level 1 farmer could clear the trial regardless. Whispers rippled through the queue that the teacher was taking things too far, even given Lin Feng's agricultural class. Rejection was standard, but this public degradation was simply uncalled for. A rumor floated that this examiner had flunked his own promotion and was exiled to the admissions desk, which explained his sour temperament. The man then roared that anyone unwilling to sit for the assessment could beat it. Later, Lin Feng was shuffled to a different zone, where the proctor smirked at the group, suggesting it wasn't too late to forfeit and kowtow in gratitude for the mercy of leaving. Lin Feng found the pacing agonizingly slow. He summoned his minions, noting that waiting for rabbits to stumble into snares would take an eternity. He commanded them to silently exterminate the demon-horned rabbits nearby, without alerting a soul to their presence. The summons dashed into the adjacent woods and executed his will with precision. They obliterated so many rabbits, it defied belief. Even Lin Feng was flabbergasted, realizing that these two entities were absurdly potent for level 1, feeling like he'd struck gold. Moments later, the bell tolled, and the instructor, the official, declared that time was up. All candidates were directed to step forward and submit the rabbit horns they had harvested. The first student approached with only 2 horns and was instantly marked as a failure. Another stepped up with 3, only to meet the same rejecting verdict. One participant arrived empty-handed, prompting the instructor to call him useless trash and ordering him to vanish from his sight. Whispers spread through the crowd. Normally, rabbits were abundant, so why had they been so scarce on this occasion? Finally, a student managed to present 4 horns, which the instructor deemed acceptable, noting that since some failed to obtain even one, they would have to wait for the next enrollment cycle. Eventually, Lin Feng and the instructor stood face to face. The instructor sneered at him and demanded his loot, wagering that he didn't possess a single horn, but Lin Feng had gathered so many typical of a system Manhwa hero that he needed a teleportation circle to bring them all. The resulting pile was overwhelming. The instructor stood there with his jaw hanging open, and even the student behind him couldn't conceal his shock. The instructor tallied a grand total of 500 demon-horned rabbit horns. Lin Feng calmly confirmed the count was 500 and asked if he wished to count them again. The instructor furiously accused him of cheating. Just then, the director arrived, cutting him off and reprimanding him for making life difficult for a child of that age, demanding to know who had instilled such unprofessional behavior in him. The instructor panicked upon seeing the director and nervously asked why he was present. The director retorted that if he hadn't intervened, his entire stock of rabbits would have been exterminated by someone lacking professional ethics. He then informed Lin Feng that he had passed the preliminary exam. Lin Feng immediately bowed, thanking the director for his impartiality. The director noted that Lin Feng seemed oddly familiar, a comment that sparked unease in the young man. He worried his cover was blown the last thing he needed after progressing this far. Suddenly the director asked Lin Feng about his relationship with Professor Lin Ya. Lin Feng fell silent for a heartbeat, relieved that the director didn't appear to detect anything peculiar about his class. He then replied that Lin Ya was his father, and asked if the director was acquainted with him. His face lit up as he declared that Lin Feng was the son of an old friend. Assessing the situation, he asked if Lin Feng was planning to enroll in the academy and inquired if he was facing any obstacles, even offering to open a back door for him if necessary. Before he could utter another word, a female director walked over and sternly reminded him that everyone was watching. The man suddenly became aware of the surrounding gazes and tried to laugh it off, claiming he was only joking around. He told Lin Feng that his uncle had urgent matters to attend to first, but promised that once Lin Feng enrolled, he would personally give him a tour of the academy. Lin Feng couldn't shake the feeling that this teaching director seemed incredibly unreliable. The female director then addressed the crowd, instructing the students who had passed the preliminary exam to follow her lead. She encouraged those who had failed not to be disheartened, reminding them that there would always be a next time. Meanwhile, in the investigation room of the Extraordinary Academy's Sun Will branch, an analyst deduced that Dean Yu Yi and He Zhao had vanished simultaneously. He theorized that Dean Yu Yi must have uncovered He Xiao's secret and was caught during the investigation, resulting in mutual destruction. He insisted that a third party must have stolen He Xiao's legacy talent. He concluded that simply finding the individual who acquired the undead talent would reveal the truth. Another staff member acknowledged his eagerness to prove himself, but urged him to cease these baseless speculations. Tuka grumbled that no one believed him, vowing that he would eventually find the evidence. Some staff members wondered if they should intervene, pointing out that he was backed by the Duke, and getting involved might be unwise. Another colleague remarked that it was better to let to him be, noting that Sun Will Academy was designed to cultivate elites, not to allow people to force their way in, merely for status. Just then the director entered, announcing that orders had arrived from above. Once He Xiao was located, they were to eliminate him on sight. One member asked the protocol if He Xiao was already dead. The reply warned that he might have altered his appearance, and that anyone wielding necromancer skills must be eliminated. Without a second thought, over at the Extraordinary Academy's re-examination mission hall, the female director laid out the re-examination guidelines. Every student was tasked with conquering the level 5 special dungeon, situated outside the city limits, specifically the Demon Horn Beast Lair, and they had a strict 3-hour time limit to do it. The crowd instantly went into a panic. They complained that a level 5 dungeon was already asking for a miracle, considering most of them were merely level 4 or 5, while wearing down the final boss might barely be within the realm of possibility. Finishing within 3 hours sounded totally unrealistic, leading them to wonder if anyone could actually pull it off. She quickly clarified that they were not expected to clear it solo. They were permitted to form squads with a maximum size of 5 people. Once a party was assembled, they had to report back to her to register and officially start the timer. The hall instantly erupted into chaos. Students were shouting over one another, desperately looking for groups. One person yelled that they needed 2 more members and wanted a beefy front row warrior. Another claimed to be an elemental mage dealing explosive damage and was hunting for a team. Then one kid called out that he was just a little guy and asked if any big brothers would be willing to carry him. Meanwhile, Lin Feng was preoccupied checking his interface, a classic trope in this system, Manhwa. When someone approached, he looked up to find a girl introducing herself as a level 7 magic type class user. She mentioned that she had seen his preliminary exam results and was convinced that anyone capable of slaying that many demon-horned rabbits must be extremely powerful. She politely asked if she could team up with him. Lin Feng figured that a level 7 player was definitely strong enough to solo the dungeon. If he were truly just a simple farmer, he would have gladly accepted the offer, but his necromancer abilities absolutely could not be exposed, so he decided to decline. He told her that he preferred to act alone. She smiled, wished him a successful run, and walked away. Lin Feng then approached the instructor who questioned why he lacked a team and reminded him that the dungeon's difficulty should not be underestimated. Lin Feng simply asked to be issued the mission. The instructor handed it over and inquired if he was aiming for the solo clear reward, the Black Bear Gale, which was a massive boost for low-level players, but warned him against it, overestimating his own capabilities. Lin Feng thanked him for the warning. Shortly after, Lin Feng stood outside the entrance of the warning Demon Horn Beast lair alongside the other students and instructors. The instructor looked at him again and asked where his teammates were hiding. Lin Feng stated that he was entering alone. The instructor laughed, telling him that a level 5 dungeon was far too dangerous for a single person, suggesting he return after finding teammates. Lin Feng reminded him that the rules allowed for solo entry. Another instructor guessed that he was probably aiming for the solo clear reward, the Black Bear Gale. Someone else commented that he had guts but should consider whether he actually had the strength to back it up. In the end, they simply wished him good luck. Lin Feng stepped into the demon-horned beast lair. Inside, the environment was completely chaotic. Monsters with long whipping tongues were everywhere. Lin Feng noted that level 3 and level 4 monsters posed no threat to him anymore. With his summons at level 6, they could take those creatures down effortlessly. He sent energy through his body and observed that his health remained stable. Although the guide mentioned that there would be many monsters, the number he encountered was far beyond his expectations. Still, he decided it was the perfect opportunity to test his new summoning method. From the shadows of the cave, countless eyes watched him. He activated undead summoning, and this time the undead that appeared were the very lizard-type monsters that had attacked him earlier with their long tongues. He ordered his minions to charge, and they immediately rushed forward, tearing through the surrounding creatures. Lin Feng observed that the monster form undead retained certain traits from their pre-death state. They were extremely aggressive, but had low intelligence and could only follow simple commands. They also consumed less mana. He wondered if they could handle chores like carrying water when they were not fighting, as that would be convenient. He then sent his 5 stronger summons into the fray as well. Once those entered the battlefield, any monster that appeared before them was instantly wiped out. While clearing the dungeon in this awakening Manhwa, Lin Feng was already thinking about other uses for his summons. He noted that the humanoid undead possessed superior intellect, retained skills from their past lives, and displayed greater agility in combat. Looking ahead, he envisioned assigning them agricultural chores, such as weeding and fertilizing his crops. As he eliminated more monsters and cleared the area, a system alert popped up, confirming he had ascended to level 7. Lin Feng checked the time, realizing only half an hour had elapsed, yet he was already positioned outside the boss chamber. Venturing into the dungeon's deepest recess, he encountered the boss, a colossal demonic bear, restrained by chains bellowing in rage. Lin Feng saw this as the ideal opportunity to gauge his total fighting prowess and called forth every unit in his arsenal. He commanded Hatch to restrain the beast from the front, directed another minion to debilitate it with hexes, and ordered the remainder to target its vulnerabilities. His army carried out the orders flawlessly, and he observed their teamwork significantly improving. He kept replenishing his mana as sustaining dominion over such potent creatures demanded a massive reserve of energy. In no time, his elite units utterly overwhelmed the boss and decimated everything in the vicinity. A subsequent alert triggered declaring he had hit level 8, while a mound of loot materialized. Lin Feng felt let down, finding only a 10-point stamina boost, dismissing it as futile, and remarking that it paled in comparison to the buffs from his super crops. A settlement prompt then tallied the dungeon completion bonuses, verifying his dual status as a farmer and necromancer before dishing out the appropriate prizes. Lin Feng was startled to discover that the settlement phase had actually granted him 2 distinct sets of rewards. He wondered if his dual class was the key, similar to a protagonist in a leveling manhwa. If rewards doubled, then perhaps there was room for manipulation using the crops he grew as well. Back outside the dungeon entrance, the other students stood aghast. They refused to accept that he had cleared the run solo. Insisting it was an impossibility, they alleged he must have merely entered the cave for appearance's sake, without venturing deep within. One student noted his pristine condition, arguing he couldn't have conceivably battled a horde of demonic beasts. Lin Feng disregarded their gossip and walked directly to the instructor, stating he was ready to submit the mission. When the teacher verified the logs, she was stunned that he had actually succeeded and done so alone. The instructor watched as Lin Feng simply smiled. She informed Lin Feng that she would forward his mission scroll to the administration. She warned him that clearing a dungeon solo was excessively dangerous, and having a freshman die upon entry would cause a massive scandal. Lin Feng thanked her for the advice. She directed him to the academy auditorium for the final interview, and suggested he take a breather first. Stepping out of the building, Lin Feng realized that everyone around him was staring. Back inside, the instructor silently prayed that another teacher would instill some caution in him, knowing that surviving the academy would be brutal if he remained this reckless. Lin Feng walked on but sensed two figures tailing him. He quietly began channeling his magic, while the duo observed him from a distance. One whispered that a solo clear in this awakening Manhwa world meant his strength wasn't simple and questioned if they were making a mistake. The other dismissed the concern, arguing that no matter how strong he was still under level 10, meaning his power was capped. A third goon noted that Lin Feng had just exited the dungeon and must have drained his energy without recovery. They planned to overwhelm him with their numbers, clearly targeting the Demon Bear Gale reward that boosted stamina by 10 points. Seeing him drift further away, they panicked and made their move. They shouted for him to halt, disrespectfully calling him a farmer. Lin Feng asked if they were addressing him. Striking bizarre poses, they accused him of hogging all the rewards, asking if he wasn't afraid of exploding from greed. One claimed he just had dumb luck and snagged a bargain. Another demanded he hand over the Demon Bear Gale and the skill scroll. The third threatened him to be sensible, or they would teach a mere farmer the true power of a combat class. Lin Feng felt second-hand embarrassment and asked why they had singled him out. One sneered, asking if he was pretending to be clueless. Another explained that the exclusive solo clear reward, the Demon Bear Gale, added 10 stamina and was incredibly valuable. To their eyes, such an artifact had no business in the hands of a mere farmer, but Lin Feng couldn't grasp what the fuss was about. He figured that if 10 stamina points were considered a miracle, then the watermelons he harvested every summer could provide the exact same boost without the hassle of slogging through a dungeon. Nonchalantly, he asked if the treasure they were raving about was the very object in his grip. The second they laid eyes on the item, greed took hold of the trio, and they aggressively demanded that Lin Feng hand it over immediately. However, before a single finger could graze it, the item spontaneously combusted and crumbled to ash. Suddenly, a voice pierced the air, asking what exactly they thought they were pulling. It was Ailing, the level 7 girl from before. She stepped in, reminding them that unauthorized private combat was strictly forbidden within the academy, asking if they were eager to get disqualified. One of the boys snapped back, telling her to mind her own business and stay out of it. Ailing shot back that if the injustice was too painful to watch, then it absolutely was her business. She issued a stern warning for them to disperse instantly, or she would report them to the instructor and see who ended up suffering more. Callously, the boys dared her to go ahead and file that report, fully convinced that she wouldn't even get the chance to leave. Since she was so determined to shield a lowly farmer, they decided they would take her out of the equation too. They lunged forward, vowing to wrap this up in a heartbeat. Watching the scene unfold, Lin Feng pondered if she could manage the situation solo. Being a level 7 awakened user, she ought to be powerful enough to crush a few small fry. Just as Ailing proposed that they team up, she spun around, only to find that Lin Feng had already vanished. From a safe distance off to the side, Lin Feng lobbed an object back, shouting his thanks for the cover and claiming the loot was hers. Ailing froze in sheer disbelief as all three aggressors shifted their rage onto her. It felt like a twisted joke. She went from savior to victim in seconds. Sometime later, inside a private restroom, Lin Feng inspected the skill scroll he had snagged during the dungeon run. It appeared useless in its current state. Puzzled, he began channeling mana into it, a classic trope in any system manhwa. A notification flashed. New skill acquired, special cultivation beginner grade. This ability consumes mana and designated materials to nurture and fortify undead summons, offering a chance to raise their level, enhance quality, or unlock fresh abilities. Lin Feng. He confirmed that the method worked, realizing he needed to infuse mana from both of his classes simultaneously to trigger the activation. Summoning his units, he decided to test this new skill. Following a session of special cultivation, both of his main summons ascended to level 8. The Demon Horned Bear attained level 9, while the Demon Horned Lizard Eagle progressed to level 7. Lin Feng was thoroughly satisfied with the results. Witnessing the immense power of his newly strengthened summons, he couldn't help but think the only downside was the lack of fresh land for experimentation. He had no desire to ruin his home fields simply to test strange crops. Just then, he spotted the girl from earlier, who had addressed him as the Demon Bear Guy. Lin Feng merely laughed, reminding her that the item was rightfully hers. She insisted that an object of such value could not possibly be given away for free, yet Lin Feng failed to grasp why anyone would treat such rotten material like a treasure. She questioned her own hearing rotten. Later, Lin Feng ventured deep into the forest, scanning his surroundings to ensure he was unobserved. He began channeling his magic, eager to see what impact the new skill would have on his crops. A monstrous plant sprouted, though, at first glance, it appeared no different from usual. Suddenly, he noticed something shocking. The crop was moving. He stared in disbelief, amazed that the plants possessed the ability to move independently. Meanwhile, in a scene typical of a system Manhwa, a spirit energy detector picked up unusual readings as someone began tracking them. Tuka sensed the aura of a necromancer and rushed to investigate, convinced his deduction was correct. He planned to eliminate the source immediately. Before long, he encountered Lin Feng, who happened to be walking by. Tuka seized him by the shoulder, demanding to know if he was a farmer. Lin Feng wondered if Tuka had been personally wronged by a farmer in the past. A look of disgust crossed Tuka's face as he recoiled his hand. He demanded to know if Lin Feng had spotted a suspicious person nearby. Lin Feng was momentarily caught off guard, but replied that he indeed had. When Tuka urgently asked for the location, Lin Feng pointed directly at him, stating the person was right there. Tuka was furious that a simple farmer dared to utter such words. He proclaimed himself an elite of the Sunhei Academy and was the nephew of the Iron Lion Duke. To have a lowly farmer treat him with such rudeness was unforgivable, and he threatened to take Lin Feng down right then and there. Deep within the woods, Tuka's roar reverberated as his body started transforming. Incensed by Lin Feng's remarks, he proclaimed that a humble peasant would pay a steep price for such foolishness. His fury triggered a shift into his beast form. His frame expanded, muscles rippled, and his aura blasted through the forest, shaking the trees and sending rubble flying through the air. Lin Feng had to shield his face just to keep the debris out of his eyes. Lin Feng then muttered, "Taste." This recalling how the monk's hood in his field had been accidentally corroded by undead mana, gaining a potent paralysis effect. The last time he tested some on himself, he had been numb and unable to move for one entire day. Ground into a fine powder, the substance functioned perfectly as a natural anesthetic. He tossed the dust toward the raging beast. Tuka, blinded by his own anger, inhaled the cloud without realizing it. In moments his vision went blurry. His limbs turned to jelly, and a wave of dizziness hit him hard. He could not believe his strength was suddenly draining away. Tuka demanded to know what trick Lin Feng had used. Lin Feng stood there calmly, fingers pinching his nose shut to avoid inhaling any of the powder himself. He explained that it was simply monk's hood powder, a resource commonly found in the fields, the very places Tuka claimed to despise. And now that simple farmer's material had completely incapacitated the Duke's nephew. Lin Feng asked if he still believed farmers were useless. If so, he called him an idiot, stating that farmers could perform insane feats, often surpassing combat classes, and could even defeat them. Then, while Tuka lay paralyzed, Lin Feng approached and delivered a solid punch straight to his beast form head. Later, when the transformation finally wore off, Tuka was seen bound tightly to a tree. Lin Feng told him that if he could not even beat a farmer, then he had no right calling himself an elite. He said he would leave him there to cool off, and that when someone eventually found him, he should consider it a lesson learned. Suddenly, an academy-wide announcement summoned all candidates to gather at the auditorium for the instructor interview. Lin Feng realizing the interview was about to commence, he dashed off, fully aware that this was an unmissable event, while a massive crowd had already amassed outside the grand auditorium of the Extraordinary Academy. A vast number of these candidates possessed zero interest in actual academics. Their sole motivation for attending was to ogle the female students, fantasizing about a lavish, burden-free existence bankrolled by their wealthy parents, where they could indulge in pleasures without lifting a finger or facing accountability. at least, until the harsh reality of the world inevitably shatters their delusions. As Lin Feng strides past, the spoiled brats loitering outside the hall begin to whisper among themselves. One murmur suggests that he is the legendary figure who single-handedly conquered the level 5 dungeon. Another voice claims his only talents are fleeing from danger and leeching off women, while someone else remarks that he is even more pathetic than Sai and Bo. Yet another chimes in, arguing that while Lin Feng might appear strong to the average applicant, he himself is a level 5 elite, giving him a distinct superiority. Ailing catches up to Lin Feng and attempts to return the item, once more adamant that she has no desire to hold onto it. Lin Feng reiterates that she ought to keep it as the object is utterly useless to him. As he nonchalantly snacks on some produce, a classic system Manhwa notification flashes before his eyes. Temporary Constitution +2. Temporary Constitution +2. The bystanders remain fixated on him, completely ignoring their female companions, who suddenly appear far less intriguing than this enigmatic farmer, who managed to clear a dungeon all on his own. Lin Feng, however, fails to comprehend why there is such a commotion surrounding him. He questions why everyone treats mere garbage as if it were a priceless treasure, wondering if the entire crowd is comprised of complete morons. Inside the auditorium, a panel of instructors is seated behind elongated tables. One announces that this interview process is reciprocal. While masters select their disciples, the students also have the right to choose their instructors. The goal is to forge a partnership that brings success to both parties. Candidates are instructed to step forward when their names are announced. The first individual summoned to the stage is Xian. He strides forward, introducing himself as a level 6 Earth attribute warrior, and showcases his prowess by conjuring a suit of rock armor. Energy surges around his frame, and while the stone plating appears solid and impressive, it pales in comparison to the likes of Master Chief. An instructor nods approvingly, identifying himself as a level 44 Earth Berserker, and inquires if Xian would accept him as a mentor. Xian accepts, without hesitation, practically trembling with enthusiasm. Following him, Nanggong Wu is called up, and finally, it is Lin Feng's turn. He rises and approaches the evaluation panel, but the surrounding crowd continues to glare at him with a palpable blend of envy, skepticism, and pure malice. Despite the piercing gazes and hushed critiques digging into his spine, Lin Feng advanced with utter indifference. He announced his presence steadily. "I am Lin Feng, a level 8 spirit farm lord." As his energy rippled outward, a few female students gasped softly. One murmured that hitting level 8 at his age was remarkable. However, another retorted that he was merely a farmer, and she had zero interest in agricultural types. A male student sneered that this academy was designed to forge elites for the vanguard, not to pamper civilians until they turned into cannon fodder. Seeking to diffuse the tension, an instructor noted that Lin Feng's initial assessment and subsequent retest scores were exemplary, proving he possessed genuine aptitude. The director cleared his throat before proposing a practical combat assessment to settle the divisiveness. The faculty members immediately concurred. A female instructor nodded her assent while another grumbled that he was indifferent and simply wished to go home for a decent meal. Turning to Lin Feng, the director inquired if he was amenable to the challenge. He reiterated that their primary goal was deploying capable warriors to the front lines to battle the demon clan. Lacking combat prowess meant that enlisting would result in nothing but a futile death. Lin Feng's thoughts churned rapidly. A fighting assessment engaging openly might expose his hidden class in this awakening Manhwa, a secret he absolutely had to protect. Caution was paramount at this stage. He plastered on a polite smile, masking every pride, shred of anxiety, and accepted the terms. Shortly after, at a makeshift arena on the auditorium grounds, the crowd assembled to witness the spectacle. The examiner, a formidable instructor, faced Lin Feng and explained that the trial was straightforward. Survive 5 minutes to demonstrate his battle readiness. As the instructor unleashed his power, earth quaked beneath them. His aura erupted like a tempest, causing the onlookers to buckle under the intensity. Many were driven to their knees, physically crushed by the weight of his spiritual pressure. They whispered in reverence, wondering to determine if this crushing presence truly belonged to someone surpassing level 40. Every spectator in the audience froze instantly. Beneath the suffocating pressure of a level 44 instructor, they witnessed a spectacle that caused their jaws to drop. The humble farmer remained standing completely unmoved. He wasn't trembling, kneeling, or gasping for air like the others. He maintained a slight polite bow, yet his hands adopted a pose suspiciously reminiscent of Iron Man charging his repulsors. A whisper of disbelief floated through the crowd, noting the man acted as if nothing was happening. The instructor, clearly impressed, commended him, declaring that his persistence alone was worthy of high praise. He encouraged Lin Feng to unleash all his capabilities and strike with full force. Upon hearing this, Lin Feng sprang into action, admitting to himself that, while the pressure of a level 44 expert was terrifying, it was still within the limits of what he could endure. He concentrated mana into his palms, shaping a luminous orb as he commanded, "Come forth, my servants." Swathed in spiraling nature mana, the undead summon began to materialize, a clever exploit in this leveling manhwa world. Masking undead creatures with nature mana effectively concealed the necromancer's aura. It was the only safe method to summon without revealing his forbidden class. A vague silhouette of a cabbage-shaped bear emerged first, leading Lin Feng to think that honestly, no one would ever suspect this cabbage-headed bear was actually undead. As the summoning concluded, the audience gasped. They remarked that it appeared to be a rare variant class, marveling at the abundance of nature mana surrounding the creature. Curiosity crackled through the crowd. They were finally witnessing something truly unique. The instructor drew his blades, both engulfed in their own blazing aura, and stood face to face with the summon. Unaware of the true monster he was about to engage, the instructor charged. Both sides rushed at each other with full speed, and their collision sent shockwaves of aura rippling across the clearing. The instructor launched a wild offensive, screaming as he pressed his attack forward. The summon staggered under the barrage, showing visible signs of strain. Watching from the sidelines, the director noted that the summon was remarkably loyal, adding that any other creature would have usually vanish after taking that kind of punishment, yet this creature stubbornly marched on, throwing punches without hesitation. As the instructor dodged, the director clicked his tongue in disappointment, questioning if Old G was simply too weak. He just couldn't wrap his head around why Old G was putting up such a lackluster performance. Meanwhile, Lin Feng remained stoic, knowing the simple truth: undead minions neither feel pain nor complain. Recovering from such superficial damage costs merely a speck of mana, which is exactly why they remain indifferent. Old G initially planned to just flex for the class, but he hadn't anticipated that Lin Feng would possess such genuine talent. Unable to stomach the director's disapproving glare any longer, the instructor decided it was time to get serious. He assured Lin Feng not to panic, promising to compensate him later for the soon-to-be-destroyed summon. He told the boy to watch closely, noting that summoners typically pay a heavy price to contract these creatures. It was common knowledge that once a summon falls, the contract is void, terminated, and gone forever. Activating the Berserker skill, Bloodthirst, the instructor unleashed a massive punch that sent the undead summon flying backward. Its body fractured like brittle stone before dissolving into thin air, vanishing without a trace. Arms crossed and oozing smugness, the instructor confidently declared that Lin Feng must be devastated by the loss. He even graciously added that it was okay to cry, claiming he appreciated students who showed raw emotion. In his mind, he pictured Lin Feng weeping like a poor farmer boy who just had his favorite toy smashed. Yet reality told a different story. Lin Feng stood there, stone-faced, showing zero sadness, panic, or even mild annoyance. His expression was so inscrutable that it left everyone guessing, and the instructor found himself thoroughly confused. He started wondering if the boy was so overcome with grief that he had simply gone emotionally numb. Suddenly, a mass of vines erupted from beneath Lin Feng's feet, surging forward like serpents, aiming straight for the teacher. Before he could blink, they bound him tight, leaving him shocked and bellowing in anger, demanding an explanation. Unfolding, accusing Lin Feng of fighting dirty by relying on such a massive horde of summons. The vines constricted, squeezing the instructor until he struggled in vain. Suddenly, with a thunderous roar and a surge of power, he snapped the bindings apart. The director finally intervened, ordering them both to cease fire. He declared that Lin Feng had proven his worth and was fully qualified to become a student of the Extraordinary Academy. However, he noted that all nature-type instructors were currently deployed to the battlefield, so there was no one available to teach Lin Feng for the time being. Unfazed, Lin Feng immediately asked the most crucial question. Then, what about my cultivation resources? The director assured Lin Feng that the academy would never withhold anyone's cultivation resources. Everything would be issued normally, according to standard protocol. He added that since Lin Feng had performed exceptionally in the exam, he was allowed to make one special request. Hearing that, Lin Feng felt as if the heavens had opened. Freedom and resources, truly a paradise. So he immediately said, Then, I want a piece of land. The director blinked, taken aback. That was absolutely not what he expected. For most students, a request like this was the moment to demand high-grade equipment, rare cultivation treasures, or maybe even a luxurious private hall, where they could party with beautiful girls until morning instead of studying. But this kid was different. The director asked to confirm if Lin Feng really didn't want any precious resources or high-tier items and only wanted land. Lin Feng laughed, explaining that he was a spirit farm lord. Without land, how could he possibly call himself one? The director nodded in agreement. He told Lin Feng there was a piece of abandoned, training wasteland in the west of the city that had been idle for a long time. He granted Lin Feng permission to use it, however he saw fit. This was exactly what Lin Feng had hoped for. He thanked the director sincerely. The instructors then ushered him backstage to rest. Later, inside a quiet room, Lin Feng's file sat on a table. An instructor looked over it and murmured that the Spirit Farm Lord was a fascinating class in this awakening manhwa. A female instructor entered urgently and told the principal she had something important to report. The principal asked what it was as she handed him a delicate, scroll-like item. Upon unfurling it, the contents were truly startling. The document confirmed that Tuka, the investigation team member who was hunting for Hisha, had been slain by a necromancer. His corpse was discovered not far from the auditorium. The report theorized that a dark mage had infiltrated the academy. This presented a monumental dilemma, one capable of rocking the institution to its core. However, Lin Feng was not the killer. He had merely bound Tuka to teach him a lesson. The true culprit had intentionally framed Lin Feng. In an environment where the masses already looked down on farmers, we know exactly who they would blame first. One wonders how the plot of this awakening manhwa will twist next. At the fine training wasteland located west of the city, Lin Feng strode across the desolate earth while inspecting the paper in his hand. He verified aloud that this was the designated spot, the training wasteland to the west of Fenyuan City. A soft emerald glow materialized in his palm as he triggered the land assignment spell. A system notification appeared. 100 mu of training grounds west of Fenyuan City. Ownership Extraordinary Academy. Temporary lease agreement 1 year. Exclusion barrier activated. Authorized student Lin Feng. The young man clicked his tongue, remarking that a single year seemed a bit stingy, but considering that the majority of students would be deployed to the battlefield after 12 months. Anyway, it was understandable. Furthermore, he was ecstatic to have a full 100 mu of territory under his absolute command for a whole year. He mused that this was the true privilege of a spirit farmstead master. While others might scoff at the occupation, the sheer insanity concealed within this profession was a secret only he possessed. It would enable him to dominate the board from the shadows while reigning above them all. He pointed a finger skyward, his aura churning violently around him as he summoned his entire legion of undead to the field. Now, he declared, let us get to work. Instantly, the horde of summons dispersed across the property. Some began plowing the earth, while others were managing the irrigation channels. A few zoomed across the soil, like tractors tilling rows with breakneck speed. Meanwhile, Lin Feng basked in the sunlight, stretching out in comfort. Magic truly transforms lives, he sighed contentedly. The ancients, it truly didn't deceive me. Suddenly, someone tapped him on the shoulder. Lin Feng assumed the reclamation work was done and commented that their initiative must be stronger than he expected. But one of the undead only buzzed in response. Lin Feng inspected him closely and sighed. Expecting undead to have independent consciousness was still too much, he thought. Feeling slightly disappointed, he walked away. Unbeknownst to him, the celestial undead behind him looked confused, then smirked faintly, a hint of intelligence that Lin Feng completely missed. Lin Feng entered the greenhouse where he began inspecting the plants inside. Floating notifications hovered above each crop. Stamina +1, permanently unripe. Stamina +1, permanently unripe. Attack power +1, permanently unripe. Unripe. Life +1, temporarily unripe. Seeing the glowing notifications above the plants, Lin Feng felt genuinely happy. He thought that while other people cultivated their strength through long bitter training, he could improve using crops, balanced nutrition, and a solid foundation. It was truly a blessing. He also felt it was a pity that only he could make crops with these effects. If he could increase the yield and let everyone improve through his plants, wouldn't the demon clan be nothing more than clay chickens and pottery dogs before them? After tending to the greenhouse, he realized that just planting the special crops typical of a leveling Manhwa wouldn't be enough. He needed to plant plenty of ordinary crops outside to camouflage everything. Otherwise, the greenhouse's secrets would be discovered, and that was the last thing he could afford. Exposure would ruin all of the insane plans he was crafting in his mind. So, for now, he simply rolled up his sleeves and got to work. 3 days later, the wasteland had completely transformed, becoming bigger, greener, and more alive than anything it had been in years. Lin Feng stood in the middle of the field, shovel in hand, demonstrating to his larger summons how to dig properly. He asked if they understood and hoped they would finally grasp what he meant. A few of the undead still looked confused as they clumsily mimicked his movements, but at least they were trying. He sighed with satisfaction, thinking that having this group of helpers made planting so much easier, vegetables at a much more rapid pace. Suddenly, he noticed one of them acting suspiciously. Lin Feng shouted, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" The frightened undead flinched. It had been happily munching on a plump potato. Lin Feng marched over, and the creature stiffened in terror, before slowly turning its head. At that moment, a notification appeared. Undead Lizard Level 6 Temporary Status. Bone density temporarily increasing. Defense temporarily increasing. Lin Feng stared in utter disbelief. All of these undead lizards were the spoils he had gained from the previous dungeon. The only difference was that this one had eaten a potato. He wondered whether undead could also receive the buffs from spiritual crops. If that were true, the implications would be absolutely insane. In the days that followed, Lin Feng began a systematic phase of experimentation, feeding different crops to various undead, and meticulously recording every change, every buff, and every mutation. The research of a true spirit farmstead master had officially commenced. Meanwhile, another figure appeared near the training wasteland, moving silently between the crops and the shadows. He frowned as he surveyed the surroundings, finding the scene peculiar. When he had probed the area earlier, none of these structures or plants had existed. The barrier around the land seemed flimsy to his eyes, resembling nothing more than a paper-thin, marshy wall. He concluded he could tear through it with a single casual slash. He spotted only one person inside, and wondered if the entire setup was a trap. The concept intrigued him. Just as he stepped forward, a mechanism beneath him triggered. He sensed the danger too late. He tried to halt his momentum, but chaos erupted instantly. Something burst out of the soil and detonated right beneath him. The sudden blast startled him, although he managed to dodge at the final second. He scoffed, remarking that this level of trickery was insufficient to deal with him. But then, more of those explosive devices began erupting from the underground, angry, pulsing, and swelling with unstable energy. Now, even the intruder felt a chill crawl up his spine. He cursed, demanding to know what these abominations were. A chain of massive explosions followed so intense that the shock waves were visible from a great distance. The blasts all seemed rooted to a glowing green entity deep beneath the explosions. Ground. It stood as a magnificent entity resembling a fragment of the Earth's own spirit that Lin Feng had cultivated. It observed the trespasser with eerie, luminous eyes through the dense smoke, causing the invader to stagger backward. He cursed once more, muttering that if he did not need to earn the Duke's trust, he would never have ventured here a second time. He vowed that once he struck Lin Feng down, he wanted to test whether these explosions could truly halt him. He then began slashing through everything, roots, plants, and vines, destroying the meticulous work Lin Feng and his undead laborers had invested in the field. He did not care about the effort involved. He only craved destruction. Yet, as he hacked through the vegetation, something unusual caught his attention. He paused, sensing a faint energy signature, an aura unmistakable to the undead. His expression shifted instantly. A memory surfaced, recalling the words of a wise priest. On this reconnaissance mission to Fengguan City, your primary objective is to locate the necromancer, HIJACKS. Since our last contact, he has vanished, despite his agreement with our clan. The intruder's eyes narrowed as he wondered if this location was actually HIJACKS' sanctuary. But why would HIJACKS choose to hide here of all places? Could he have betrayed their clan? The intruder clicked his tongue, reasoning that for the sake of the secret technique of immortality, a traitor like HIJACKS truly possessed no shame. Suddenly, the intruder felt an even more potent surge of energy, pulsing from the surrounding flora. The longer he remained, the more unstable the aura became. He decided it was wiser not to linger, as locating Haichia was the priority. Night gave way to day, bringing Lin Feng's morning shock. He woke up, grabbed his tools, and headed out with a cheerful demeanor. He had already catalyzed and fertilized most of the fields yesterday. Today he intended to tend to the remaining areas. However, the moment he fully opened his eyes and looked ahead, he froze, his jaw dropping. He stared for several seconds, utterly speechless. Then he dropped his tool with a loud clatter and sprinted toward the greenhouse. His heart pounded and his mind went blank. My greenhouse. Everything he had so carefully cultivated looked devastated. Above him, several figures suddenly descended from the sky. Lin Feng braced himself, assuming they were enemies. But after getting a closer look, he muttered in confusion. Why would enforcement team members appear here? The enforcement officers touched down and swept the perimeter. One of them announced that their demonic energy detector had pinpointed the source of the disturbance to this precise location. They puzzled over why the training wasteland had suddenly transformed, questioning if members of the demon clan were lurking nearby. A system notification materialized. In front of them, this land has already been leased. The officers exchanged glances. It wasn't unclaimed territory after all. However, they insisted that demon clan activity couldn't be ruled out, necessitating caution. One officer addressed Lin Feng with a polite veneer, identifying them as the enforcement team, yet the atmosphere was far from welcoming. Lin Feng felt deeply uneasy. Why would the enforcement unit descend upon a place like this? The lead officer explained that their sensors had detected demonic energy here and requested Lin Feng lower the barrier to allow for an inspection. Another officer added that even they weren't fully clear on the situation yet. Lin Feng's stomach knotted in anxiety. Demonic energy on the land he had rented just a few days ago. How was that even plausible? Before he could respond, a voice from the rear, sharp with impatience, snapped. How long does it take for a mere farmer to drop a barrier? Tuka was just slain by the demon clan and now their aura spikes here. If you ask me, he is a spy. The man's tone was icy and venomous, his expression grim. A cold chill raced down Lin Feng's spine. One enforcement member pointed directly at Lin Feng, coldly ordering him to surrender and accusing him of espionage. His expression was deadly serious, signaling he was prepared to take drastic measures. He had no intention of showing mercy to a humble farmer. Another member intervened, suggesting the captain might be acting too rashly, considering 2 people had just died and demonic energy had resurfaced. Lin Feng was indeed highly suspect. In reality, both officers were already viewing Lin Feng with wariness. Ironically, the fact that he was a farmer only deepened their distrust. In their eyes, a simple farmer couldn't possibly orchestrate something like this alone. Thus, the only explanation was that he must be an operative, a spy who didn't operate openly, opting instead to assist the demon clan from the shadows. One officer demanded Lin Feng's cooperation with the inquiry and ordered him to lower the barrier. Lin Feng's heart sank. He knew granting them entry was impossible. Given the chaotic events that had transpired within the field, allowing the enforcement squad to roam freely would be catastrophic. He needed a strategy to make them leave. Adopting a mask of innocence and donning a pitiful expression, he lamented his status as a lowly class holder, claiming he had always faced ridicule. He insisted he only wished to quietly farm and cultivate his strength in solitude. Yet now, even the authorities viewed him with suspicion. He asked if they truly believed a nobody like him capable of such schemes, wondering if a humble man could no longer beg for a shred of peace. Visibly moved, one team member turned to his superior, suggesting that Lin Feng appeared miserable enough already, and questioning the necessity of pressing the matter further. The captain, however, remained entirely unconvinced by the act. He snapped that feigning misery was a common ploy, and declared he would not be swayed by such cheap theatrics. Convinced Lin Feng was performing, the captain wasted no breath, winding up his fist and lunging forward, aiming a blow directly at Lin Feng with devastating power. He put every ounce of strength into the attack. Whether he disregarded Lin Feng's class or suspected he held the hidden strength of an awakening Manhwa hero, he struck to kill. Had Lin Feng been a typical peasant, that strike would have permanently maimed him on the spot. However, contrary to logic, Lin Feng intercepted the fist. Panic set in immediately. He realized he had invested far too many points into his constitution. Under normal circumstances, the punch would have felt like nothing, but the situation demanded a performance of agony. Thus, despite halting the attack effortlessly, he forced himself to stumble backward, feigning the reaction of receiving a brutal hit. The captain watched in shock, muttering about the lethal force he had applied. Yet the farmer was still standing. Something was clearly amiss. Regardless of how pathetic Lin Feng tried to appear, the captain's skepticism only intensified. It seemed the officer now truly desired his death. Lin Feng cried out, accusing him of using brutal violence to force a confession. He wanted to close the case quickly, so he leaned into the act, posing as a downtrodden and miserable little farmer. This time, another enforcement member finally snapped, grabbing the captain's arm and urging him to calm down. He pointed out that Lin Feng was clearly using nature magic, a force that the demon clan absolutely despised. This was common knowledge, a fact even a 6-year-old would know. The captain faltered, realizing he might have crossed the line. Yet since Lin Feng was just a lowly farmer, he felt little guilt. Assaulting a peasant didn't register as a crime in his eyes. The more rational members stepped forward to apologize, admitting they had misread the situation. They confirmed Lin Feng's nature magic was pure and promised to clarify everything in the official report. Lin Feng immediately grabbed that lifeline, thanking the officer and calling him a just and righteous lord. The man replied that it was simply his duty, offering one last apology for the captain's excessive aggression. But behind them, the captain's rage hadn't cooled in the slightest. Witnessing this scene only irritated him further. He raised his hand again, readying a vicious strike. But before he could act, the other members stepped in front of Lin Feng. They refused to permit any more injustice, making it clear they wouldn't allow him to cross the line again. This only enraged the captain further, but with his own team united against him, he had no choice. With a cold snort, he mounted his dragon and departed. Lin Feng watched them vanish into the distance and sighed. Inwardly, this was troublesome. Farming alone wouldn't cut it. He needed the progression of a leveling Manhwa for self-preservation. Just then, a paper bird fluttered down before him and spoke in a crisp voice. Freshman Lin Feng, please report to the academy drill grounds tomorrow morning for the new student capability assessment and grading battles. The message ended with a stern reminder that absence was not permitted, stamped by the culminated Extraordinary Academy Academic Affairs Office. After reading it, Lin Feng let out a long sigh. Why was living a peaceful life so difficult? Trouble kept piling up, one thing after another, as if the world was determined to stop him, allow him to stay low-key for even a moment. Elsewhere, two figures stood quietly observing the scene. One of them, a woman, remarked that the nature magic she sensed was both pure and extremely potent. She asked the principal if the child was truly just a farmer. The principal admitted he wasn't sure. According to the system, Lin Feng's profession was spirit farmstead master. The woman raised an eyebrow, surprised that someone like her, a level 50 nature type archmage named Vera, would take an interest. She speculated that it sounded like a mutated class, and that the boy clearly had secrets. Still, she noted that the nature magic alone was enough to clear him of any suspicion of colluding with the demon clan. The demon clan couldn't possibly fake such a strong life aura, one that would actually make them sick just by being near it. The principal agreed, saying that certain people should calm down. For now. He added that the real show was only just beginning. An aura wrapped around the two of them, and they vanished from sight, having already obtained what they came for. Later, at the Extraordinary Academy freshman drill grounds, crowds of students gathered, buzzing with complaints. Someone asked why there was another test, when the interviews and instructor selections were already done. Another complained that the academy seemed to be throwing test after test at them without any logic. Someone else claimed to have inside intel and teased the others, only to immediately say he wasn't telling. Lin Feng stood quietly among them, uninterested in what he thought were pointless ramblings from a bunch of idiots. Soon a female instructor arrived and ordered everyone to be silent. She acknowledged that they all had questions, especially about why an all-student entrance assessment was being held after the instructor interviews. She explained that urgent military intelligence had arrived from the front line the previous day. The demon clan's offensive had intensified, and the fortress outside the third barrier was now in critical danger. The academy had received direct orders to immediately dispatch a batch of vital forces to provide support. The students were stunned. One of them blurted out in disbelief that they had just enrolled, and now they were being deployed toward the front lines. One student protested, claiming they had been told they would first have time to study and cultivate. The instructor calmly replied with a proverb, If the nest is overturned, how can the eggs possibly remain intact? If the fortress fell, the demon clan's spearhead would be aimed straight at Fangguan City. At that point, she asked, did they really believe they could continue to cultivate peacefully inside the academy? She made it explicitly clear that this was not a request. It was a mandatory conscription. In humanity's time of peril, no single individual was permitted to remain on the sidelines. The crowd fell into a heavy silence. A small boy hesitantly called out to the girl beside him, but before he could finish his thought, Lin Feng was already observed standing quietly nearby. The girl gently reassured the boy not to worry, though she could not help but let her thoughts drift to Lin Feng. He was clearly outstanding. She wondered whether he would be selected for this conscription. The instructor then ordered all freshmen to follow instructions and proceed to the drill grounds to prepare for the practical combat assessment. While the others eagerly rushed forward, Lin Feng hung back, lost in his own calculations. He reasoned that as a farmer class user, he likely wouldn't be selected for the front lines at this stage. Otherwise, all of his farming plans would be completely disrupted. Before long, Lin Feng found himself facing a female opponent in the arena. She commented that she had heard the spirit farmstead master was skilled at hiding. Striking a dramatic pose, she declared that he would turn to ash beneath her flames. Fire surged beneath her feet, lifting her into the air as blazing waves of heat spread outward. Her attack was rapid and fierce, yet Lin Feng still sidestepped it with effortless grace. He remarked that she was too slow, and that her magic condensation was insufficient. He even added that her fire couldn't roast the sweet potatoes in his field. That comment enraged her. She immediately began chanting once more, calling upon a greater fire spirit. Flames erupted even more violently this time. However, Lin Feng had no interest in witnessing what else she could do. He simply wanted the match to end quickly. He stepped in and struck, pointing out that her wind-up was far too long, and that such techniques would never work in real combat. She was sent flying. The result was announced. Lin Feng was the winner. The duels followed one after another. Lin Feng faced Ryan, then Zomo clashed with Lin Zishi and fought Lunable and Gramble. In true leveling Manhwa fashion, Lin Feng emerged victorious in every single match. After securing such a streak of victories, he finally reckoned this was more than enough. If the pattern continued, he figured he could afford to drop the next few bouts without issue. A woman approached Lin Feng, stating that with his current talent and potential, he was fully qualified to aim for a much higher stage. Lin Feng thanked her politely, though he honestly had no clue what this higher platform was supposed to mean. She explained that by accumulating credits and passing further assessments, he could advance to the elite Sunhei Academy. There, he would gain access to superior cultivation methods and powerful instructors, potentially obtaining legendary weapons or formidable demonic beast mounts. Lin Feng thanked her again but declined, noting he didn't really need any of that. After all, he had already seen dragons, so those incentives didn't exactly impress him. The woman was taken aback, asking what he actually desired, if none of those things interested him. Lin Feng pointed calmly, declaring he only wanted a larger and better piece of land, where he could farm in peace. That answer shocked her. She clarified that she meant his ultimate goal, what he intended to do after he finished tilling those lands. Lin Feng replied that he planned to farm even more territory, allowing more people to have land to till, ensuring that anyone who wanted to farm would be able to do so. Vera was visibly surprised. She realized this child actually wanted to reclaim land on a massive scale, finding his ambition unexpectedly enormous. At that moment, the principal arrived, asking if the wasteland in the west of the city that Lin Feng was already developing wasn't sufficient. Lin Feng felt a bit embarrassed and laughed, replying that when it came to farming, the more land the better. Soon after the next match was announced, Lin Feng versus Ah Ling. Lin Feng responded immediately, heading toward the battlefield. Both the principal and Vera watched him move, the principal commenting on the kid's honesty. Vera remarked that since the child wanted it, they might as well grant it. She handed it to him. When the principal asked if she intended to recruit him, Vera replied that he was a very interesting kid. The announcement for battle preparation sounded. Ah Ling stepped forward and said that she hadn't expected to fight Lin Feng, but that she would go all out in this battle. Her expression was extremely serious. Lin Feng, however, admitted frankly that he couldn't beat her and that he had originally planned to concede. To Ah Ling, those words felt like pure humiliation. Her expression darkened as she charged forward, accusing him of mocking her. Now she was even angrier than before. Lin Feng immediately sensed something was wrong. He realized that Ling had jumped straight into her second combat phase without any hesitation and muttered to himself whether this was really how she liked to fight. He quickly began preparing his own farm aura. Thick vines burst out of the ground and surged toward Ling, wrapping around her limbs. The sudden counter caught her off guard. She'd been charging forward at full speed, but now she was forced to stop and deal with the vines first. With a sharp shout, she unleashed a powerful kick and shattered them, breaking free with brute force. Watching the exchange, Vera couldn't help commenting that a student under level 10 possessing such pure magic power was astonishing. The principal agreed, admitting that he had been shocked the first time he saw it as well. Both of them leaned forward, growing more and more interested. Vera added that even a renowned nature cultivator who had reached level 80 didn't possess magic power as pure as Lin Feng's. She concluded that this child's potential was boundless, a staple of a great awakening Manhwa. As fiery bursts from Ling collided with the restraining vines summoned by Lin Feng, the scene left them genuinely impressed. The principal remarked that such a high-quality seedling was extremely rare and that, with proper guidance, his growth would be terrifying. Before he could finish, Vera spoke decisively, saying she had already made up her mind. She wanted to take Lin Feng as her teacher. She repeated herself to be absolutely clear. The principal nodded at first, saying it wouldn't be bad if she became his teacher, then suddenly froze. It felt completely wrong. He turned to her, slowly asking if she had it backwards, but Vera calmly replied she hadn't misspoken. She meant exactly what she said. She wanted Lin Feng as her mentor. The principal stared at her, completely dumbfounded, and demanded to know if the demon clan had fried her brain. Vera replied that even if her mind were burnt to a crisp, she would still make the same choice. She was clearly far too taken with Lin Feng, and perhaps wanted something more than just a teacher-student bond. If you don't want to miss more of Lin Feng's antics in this leveling manhwa, make sure to subscribe and enable all notifications so you are always the first to know when the next chapter is released.